music. All right. And turn on the live on Facebook. Okay, it's preparing. I'm going to do the cut and paste. Oops. Oops. 1 second. V.A.C. Round table number 8. All right, going live. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. Welcome to Veterans Action Council Roundtable number 8. My name is Etienne Fontaine. I'm one of the council members. I'm joined by Council Member Michael Krawitz, Robert Kowalski, and Tony Landry Cordingly. Tonight, we're going to be discussing advocacy, our advocacy work on the local, state, federal, and Michael's case, the international level, and what are some of the examples of work that have been successful in these areas. So we're going to start off with our first discussion point, which is, what does advocacy mean to you? We're going to start off with Council Member Michael Krawitz.
It's funny, I knew the subject, but nonetheless, I was waiting for my brain to kick in upon you handing over the mic before I started actually really fully understanding what I was going to say. When I started out as a cannabis activist, I remember I looked up the word activist and I wrote the definition on a little card and I hung it on my wall, the political exponent. And since I was very deeply immersed at that time in mathematics in my engineering school, an exponent, that was kind of cool. I thought, a political exponent, kind of a double meaning. But that's what we are. We're sort of part of the machinery. We're not representatives of the representative government. We're not the constituents either. We're something else entirely. We're part of the process that is created almost to correct its own problems. It's a strange phenomenon in a modern, Western democratic society. Our forefathers broke away from the traditional models of ruling class and allowed for representative democracy and for people to vote and have individual, kind of individuals representing, regular people. We've had very rich and in between and in every part of the spectrum, and black, white, and every part of the racial, kind of spectrum as our leaders. And I think it's really important for us as sort of individuals representing special interests, I guess you'd say. We're a special interest coming in, from our own perspective, to make sure that that perspective is well considered by the regular machinery. And that's why I say we're brought in almost to correct the problems that are created by itself, the system. And I felt like we're very much welcome at every level. That's one of the things that always seemed funny to me. The common perception out there is that, that you would somehow face a lot of opposition, or that you'd be put on a list. You're representing cannabis, you're going to be put on some sort of list and you're going to be hassled. Quite the opposite. The system has always seemed to really appreciate when we politely, respectfully participate and give our input and help change the system to make it better from the inside, even if that seems rebellious, like it did when we got started at this. So hopefully that answers the question.
Well, that's your answer to the question. So, I mean, we thank you and appreciate that. Robert Kowalski, what does advocacy mean to you?
Yeah, so I guess the way I would put advocacy to me is it is fighting for something that you feel is wrong in the world, that not only does it impact you, but impacts many others. So it becomes a system that becomes much larger than yourself, and it gives you something of which to fight for. Because if you become an advocate for something, most of the time this advocacy isn't driven by money. It isn't driven by anything other than your passion and your goodwill to want to improve a system, uh, for the betterment of, more than likely, somebody you love. And so I think, in simple terms, for me, I guess advocacy is a form of showing love to the community and the world, um, and a means of making it a better place for all of us to exist in.
Thank you for that, Robert. We'll go on over to Council Member Tony Landry.
Okay, advocacy. What does advocacy mean to me? Advocacy gives me an opportunity to make a difference in more than just my little small circle in my life. For instance, like my advocacy and cannabis advocacy, something I believe in so much is that the cannabis is against our human, humanity. It's a war against humanity. So, I can either just sit around and, for instance, now I'm in Arizona. I'm from Louisiana, but I left Louisiana so I could get access to medical cannabis, and came out here, tried to, just blend in with my medical cannabis card, and I could have just shut it down and fit into the stereotype that everybody puts out there, that cannabis is, just makes you want to lay on the couch, but it's quite the contrary. Cannabis gives me a little pain relief, and I just don't believe anybody should be arrested for it. So advocacy, what it means to me, is means to go after something that I can make a difference. And it's important when you can get up in the morning and go out there and get active in changing the law, and it's going to have such a huge impact on a big people. I'm trying to look at the screen here. Okay, thanks. That's what it means to me. Get active, get involved, do something that makes a difference. Just one email can make a difference between 4.5 million people, or whatever state population you're living in. One email to your representative can change that story. You're just reaching out with your story and sharing it and making it known can make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member Tony Landry. Council Member Michael Crowitz, you had a follow-up on this.
Yeah, man. Just had to hit my unmute button here. It just strikes me that, I give the answer based on what I normally do, what I mainly advocate for. But over the years, we've taken on patient advocacy, one-on-one patient advocacy. And that's essentially what led us to be in the position to help navigate and negotiate the VA policy, for example, years ago, was that one-on-one patient advocacy. And it's a rare thing. It's a very unique thing to do that kind of work. and it's very much based on the needs of that individual. So it's a, you know, unique situation almost. You have general kind of ideas of what you're going to do, but you have to basically base everything that your responses. You have varieties of responses and varieties of scenarios, but all flow from the patient's experience and exactly where they're at and what, you know, what has been the scenario that they're dealing with. Often patients come to us that are in the VA system. They've gone to their VA doctor and all of a sudden they can't get their pain prescription filled for pain prescription pills, and they're told, oh, you violated a pain contract, you failed our drug test, and oftentimes they don't even know that they signed a pain contract or know when they did it, and they were taking a drug test without even knowing that they went to the lab thinking it was routine lab work, and all of a sudden they find out that they were being drug tested. So that is a whole mess of problems that I just said without even, you know, stopping to explain any of them. That's a lot of problems in VA policy there, that, you know, that the VA was not following policy if they did that to a vet. And we can actually work on those situations, but you have to attack it, like I said, very individually. And we have good patient advocacy inside the VA system, but not universal. Like, you know, sometimes at a VA hospital, you won't find a good patient advocate or any, and then others, there might be a great patient advocate. So, but that end of advocacy, what it means is it's a very special relationship, really. It's a one-on-one relationship with a person acting as their friend, their guide, like a Sherpa. They call it the, you know, Veterans Hospital Sherpa.
Right on. Thank you very much. Councilmember Brian Buckley, what does advocacy mean to you?
Sure. For me, it's advocacy is fighting for something that you believe in while also providing the tools to the decision makers so you can get what you want across the goal line. You know, some of you know that we're doing our veterans medical cannabis research. You know, when I had an opportunity to meet with some members of Congress, I mean, they said to me, like, hey, the days of advocacy of, you know, I'm a veteran, I use cannabis, it helps me, it's kind of maxed out. I mean, people are pretty dug in at this point. And the hearts and minds that have been influenced by it have already joined that side. And, you know, this individual told me, he goes, you know, I'll say to your face, I do believe that it works, but I'm not going to walk out that door and say anything to the media or anything unless I have something to back it up with. And that's where we came up with the idea of like, okay, let's not just sit here and say, you know, you guys stink and we're going to protest you and try to get you unelected and get someone else in there with the hopes and prayers that they might decide and fulfill some campaign promise. No, let's just provide them with the undisputable evidence that it works. So for me, advocacy is fighting for what you believe in and providing the tools that the people, that the decision makers need in order to get your point across and to accomplish the mission.
Thank you very much, Councilmember. We're going to go now to Councilmember Jeff Staker. What does advocacy mean to you?
Well, I just caught the conversation here a little bit late, but for me, it's probably all about helping out my fellow veterans. I'm not going to say that, you know, my advocacy is not self-serving, because the way I got into it was obviously being on oxycodone through the VA for almost 10 years and running the risk of accidentally overdosing. And then looking around and seeing that I wasn't in this, you know, in this alone. So it was nothing more than taking what I learned in the military and gathering my other veterans like-minded, finding out who's been doing it, like yourself, like Michael, and people I've got with earlier when I started my group, and just, you know, putting the battle plan together. And yeah, it's a long road, but you know, I'm in it to the end. And honestly, I'm seeing light at the end of the tunnel. So I think if we just keep going forward and stuff, even in Washington, D.C., we're going to get some changes and statewide. But we just need to be in there to have things in place once it all comes together after the fact. You know, we'll all be still trying to figure out legislations federally and statewise and how to control that. And again, helping other veterans and trying to get it within the VA system. So our fellow veterans that are dealing with some issues that can find the benefits of this, this medicine. So that's what it means to me.
Thank you very much. For myself, you know, basically advocacy I've always seen as a way to affect change, but using my voice, my time, my energy to affect change. I watched my mom do that when my brother, who was blind, needed access to transportation to and from the school for the blind in Louisiana, and she had to sue the state to win that right for them to actually fund that. And it also, yeah, so for me advocacy was kind of always part of the family. You know, it was realizing that there's a political system out there that is kind of against the little man. So it's about you being the little man to educate yourself to become a solution solver, where you're the ones you're pointing out the problems. But one of the things we all learned in the military is, hey, anybody can bitch about anything, but can you bring a solution and offer a solution to actually move past this impasse, this problem, this situation? And what you find is in advocacy, you find other like-minded people tend to come around. My early days in the Cannabis Action Network and going around 47 states doing rallies, teachings, and tours, there was no way we would be able to do that without local support, local organizers, people getting the permits and doing all the little things that matter when you show up and actually go to speak on a stage. There's laws against just actually doing that. So you have to follow city ordinances, there's sound ordinances, there's all kinds of different things. So advocacy is also learning about the process that's out there and figuring out who is a possible lender to your solution. Early on for us in advocacy, it was trying to find more of the wingnut sort of city council person, member of the state, or member of Congress, because they kind of had to be a little bit loony because none of the traditional politicians would touch it. And you needed somebody like a Diana Rohrbacher to submit something originally so that we could start to get some traction. Now it's the Blumenauer amendment, but again, those were ways that we found early on that change was there and available. You had to align yourself with people who could affect that change. So it was about selectively realizing that we needed to put on suits. We needed to go down and actually start talking to these politicians on the level that they're expecting from their constituency. And as Tony stated, when one person comes out and speak, depending on who and where you are, you can represent hundreds, if not tens of thousands of people and your opinion. So the number one reason we still hear from our constituency on the Hill is they don't hear enough from you. You out there, they don't hear from you. You don't write them, you don't call them, you don't talk to their assistants. You know, the people on this phone call do, because we've worked at making change in our area and realized our place in it. But you who are watching have a voice that could affect change too. And if you who are watching would actually contribute, we would see a lot of change, as well as on issues that we have. So advocacy to me is about change, the positive change that you want to see, and creatively ideating it and rallying people around you to coalesce around this idea and concept so that you can move as a unit, moving the ball forward. There's no way we could have people just said, oh, we'll just run an initiative. No, running an initiative costs millions of dollars. You've got to get people out there doing lots of polling. You've got to pay people to actually stand out there, rain, snow, sleet or shine, out there signing and gathering signatures. That costs money. These are all realities. So, advocacy also costs. That's one thing we've always all learned in one way, shape, or form. Advocacy is not cheap. Trying to change laws, is really hard. And then when you start getting into court battles, and when you start working your way up to the Supreme Court, you can start in the millions of dollars of what it takes to actually take a case all the way to the Supreme Court. And yeah, that's the realities of what I've watched friends of mine around do to affect and look at change. So advocacy means, again, my ability to contribute and use my voice and get off my couch and stop complaining about something and doing something about it. So, um, so that leads us to our second question. What are some obstacles in advocacy out there? I've listed some where, laws prohibited access, such as my brother to transportation. So court case had to be instigated after my mom actually went and talked to the state legislature, and they laughed at her. Okay. So her investigation of realizing that, oh, these politicians have not heard from enough of her constituency, that they are so ignorant that they would laugh at her, as opposed to understand where she was coming from, because she was one person speaking. Then when she started to coalesce all these different people, when she talked to the people that would meet at these bus stations to take these rides, she then started to talk to the parents and found allies in those parents. And then those allies were able to then use their voices in a cacophony, so that it was no longer just a single voice out there yelling against the wind. It was now the storm being brought to the actual legislators, so that they had no choice but to affect the change. So we'll go back to Michael Crowitz. What are some obstacles in advocacy out there that you've experienced?
Well, I figured I'd talk about the most classic one, the conundrum that we've all been working on, that we've all faced in the cannabis movement. That all of us, none of us here are old enough to really date back to the Marijuana Tax Act days. We're all post Controlled Substances Act, and that law has a complete conundrum. That it says in the law that medical cannabis is that it doesn't exist. I mean, it says right in the law that cannabis does not have medical value. It's written right into the law that it's extremely dangerous and has no value, as a medicine, no accepted medical use. Making it impossible, and created this terrible conundrum where, to try to prove that it was a medicine, you basically had to change the law first, because the law prevented you from being able to prove that it was a medicine, because you weren't able to even handle it or do anything with it because it's illegal. And that wouldn't apply to anything else. I mean, you could come up with something from, Saturn or Mars and present it, and it's a new thing, and it's not going to be illegal. It'll be only illegal if it proves itself to be dangerous. But here we had to prove cannabis was not dangerous. We had to prove this, crazy thing, prove a negative, prove that under all circumstances. I mean, you could always come up with another circumstance to test the next day. It's just this endless conundrum that we've had to face. And that's where I started out in this activism, was right there, with this conundrum. And we've had to get really creative to work our way around it. The VA policy itself was part of the strategy to work around that. But what we found, sort of looking at this, not from Veterans for Medical Cannabis Access perspective, so much as the entire cannabis movement perspective, we sort of went as far as we could and then turned around and went a different way, took different strategies. Reminds me of the little tank toy that comes up to the wall, turns around, goes in the other direction. But we worked at the national level. Timothy Leary won the case in the Supreme Court against the Marijuana Tax Act. It was found unconstitutional, created the new law. That new law, we went right into the courts, and we were in the judicial branch, and we still are. Like 50 years we've been fighting that in the courts, never really winning, but that's where we've been fighting it. And then we fought it in the legislature, and we had federal bills that we were trying to push through, and very quickly found ourselves working in the state legislatures, because there we found a little bit more room to work. And that was Robert Randall who was doing that, state legislatures. Many people don't know that there's so many bills that we passed that never really went anywhere. There were research bills that created marijuana, bills and stuff like that. They were all supposed to attach to federal legislation that then never happened. And because of all that, because of the failure of the federal legislation to ever happen, because of the failure of these state laws to ever be implemented, and then because of just a complete blockade of any kind of sensible legislation from sort of entrenched legislatures, both at the federal and the state level, that's when we started to work on state initiatives. And it's funny when I say that, Jack Harrer, I can hear him laughing in my ear here, because the first initiative was in 1972. The 13th initiative was Proposition 215 in 1996. That was the first one to pass. Hey, try again, man. We don't give up, man. We're the cannabis movement. It takes us 13 efforts, 20, whatever, 30 years, no problem. We do it. And that changed the paradigm. I mean, as you know, if you've been following along, medical cannabis opened up to more medical cannabis laws and many more medical cannabis laws. And then once the medical, it wasn't ever like the opposition said it was. It wasn't like we were trying to legalize weed by doing medical marijuana. It was never like that. But their lies and their mistruths and their ridiculous statements about cannabis didn't hold up against the light of day of people actually using it as a medicine. And that's what I think finally knocked down the door. So I don't know, it's such a complex mix of all these different levels, but we'll do what we need to get the job done, I guess.
Yeah, ingenuity is definitely a key thing for us in this movement. That's without a doubt. Councilmember Robert Kowalski, what are some obstacles that you've experienced in advocacy out there?
I think a little bit to piggyback off of what Mike just said, and a little bit of just like one word that comes to my mind is interpretation. So there's a lot of interpretation, and laws are built around interpretation. And each segment you get into at any advocacy point, you're constantly battling interpretation between government, between policy, between community. And so I think the biggest struggle in my advocacy efforts is understanding interpretation, where that interpretation has come from, and then understanding how you change interpretation by associating your interpretation to fit into their life in some way, shape, or form. And so I guess, being someone who likes to simplify things, I guess the interpretation of laws and the interpretation of what it is to be human rights, and what it means to have rights as a human being are definitely the biggest struggles and turmoils in advocacy work.
Thank you very much for that. Councilmember Tony Landry.
Some of the biggest obstacles I face is getting, public opinion or political opinion get support for an idea. Like say public opinion with cannabis has pretty much driven the stigma and all that. So we've had to overcome that with medical data, which has been hard to come by. Like Michael said, they've been looking for, negative things about cannabis for all these years. So the big, but just the opposite for psychedelic plant medicine. We have all these neat advanced imaging methods that we have now that they didn't have to put on in the toolbox to go out there and advocate for cannabis. But for plant medicine, like psilocybin is showing actual nerve growth and stuff in labs. And so that stuff is important to public opinion, is to get that information out there and get, say, you're like what I'm doing is asking a doctor that's knowledgeable in that and getting them involved in a Zoom meeting with some questions and panel, and just broadcast that out there and try and get the public to tune into it and maybe get some feedback and post informative articles and maybe for them to share, because the legislatures are looking at all these social media, these likes and shares and all. So if people can get used to getting involved on just the smallest sense of making a comment or a like or a share on social media and getting that spread out there, that information, it'll help overcome some of the obstacles on this advocacy work. But public opinion, political, a politician is not going to vote, not going to do anything that he doesn't think his constituents are against. Well, I might correct me on that, but usually that's the case. He's not going to go out and, especially something with drugs. We've been in the drug war for over 40 years and thinking all these psychedelics were dangerous, and now we're finding out that they actually heal addiction and help people out. So that information is really important to get out and change the public opinion so that they can get behind an idea. And once the public's behind it, it's a lot easier for your legislator to stand, or your local officials. And always start local with any kind of idea. If you're going to expect to make a change on a statewide level or a national level, if you don't have your support of your local officials, if they think you're just way out of the ball field, then you're certainly not going to get the support of the state officials. So overcoming those opinions are the biggest obstacle I find. And if you want to make some changes, the quickest way to do it is get the public behind you, and that's going to help you get the legislators to vote on what you need them to vote for.
Thank you, Council Member. Appreciate you. Council Member Brian Buckley. What are some obstacles and advocacy out there that you've experienced?
Right on. So I will be fully admit here, this is like my first run at being an advocate. So everyone there watching, pay attention to the other guys, because that's what I do. So we got that out there. So big thing for me, the way I am, I find our government very interesting. I think it's an amazing system. Obviously, there's not many people like us, but I think at times the government forgets that they are not America. It is us, the people. We are America, and the government works for us. And that is sometimes hard for them to realize unless they have an election coming up. So for me, I guess some of the challenges are, when you have the conversation with some people, and like I said previously, you literally have someone sitting there saying, I agree with you and I think it works, but I'm not going to say anything until I got my 6 covered and I know that I'm safe and there's nothing wrong with it. That become a little frustrating, because you're kind of like, well, if you know it, why don't you guys do something about it? But then again, I think all the great things that have come from this country have been built upon individual efforts. I mean, you look at what Henry Ford accomplished, or even recently, like an Elon Musk. I mean, these are not like the government came down and said, hey, do this. They're like, no, I'm an American. I have a great idea. I have a great opportunity. I'm going to run with it and make it happen. So I think that's one of the positives that we have going here. Kind of more on my level, some of the things that I've faced is, the ATN's, he brought it up about financially. I mean, we want to do all this research and do all these great things. That costs a lot of money to do that. So that's been a hard part. Something that I think we have an advantage of being in the military is we are comfortable being uncomfortable. And you kind of go into some things and you have an idea, but as you're going around twists and turns, new obstacles pop up in front of you. And you're like, shoot, I didn't think about this one, or I didn't think about that, or I didn't anticipate that. And unfortunately, you got to be reactive. But as long as you keep cool and you build a good team around you, and you keep your focus, you can overcome some of those obstacles and control what you can control. But I think the big thing is, some of the obstacles and things you can do to overcome is, having that drive. If you're kind of half-hearted in, I'm telling you, it's not going to work out. You got to be fully committed to what you are. You got to be patient. And you got to know how to kind of keep a happy face and make some friends. Never make enemies where you don't have to make an enemy, even if they're adamant against your stance. That's fine. Shake their hand, have a smile on your face, and prove it to them with results and facts. And eventually you're going to win them over.
Very valid points. Very, very well stated. Thank you very much, council member. Council member Jeff Staker.
Obstacles. I always see them as something I can always get around. I can get through. And just like Brian said, you got to keep evaluating the situation. Met is what we learned in the Marines, right? And but some of the obstacles I dealt with was obviously the ignorance. Once I started learning a lot myself, is the ignorance of the politicians, especially when you're dealing with one party versus another. And so what do? You bring them education and educate them. You give them the 2017 National Academy of Science and Engineering guide. You show them what other countries are doing and some of the research that's out there that they're ignorant to. When they said that, we needed more support, so what do you do after that? I put together a panel of doctors and veterans advocacy groups in Washington, D.C., right, Mike? And tried to get the word out and educate them that way. When they said we needed more support here within our state, I got the backing of the VFW, the American Legion, the AMVETS, the right state resolutions that passed. And I think the other barrier that I've been trying to break, and nothing wrong with this barrier, it's just something I see within the advocacy groups. We came in here, a lot of these politicians have a stereotype of the cannabis user, the Cheech and Chong mentality. And there's a lot of, we got a lot of colorful people in the advocacy, and sometimes that's not really the best help for everything, especially when I'm showing up with a tie and a suit, like you said, and my VFW cover, and trying to be very professional about it. But those are just little obstacles, and you just have to deal with it, and show them that there's a different side to this whole process. So those are some of the obstacles that I faced. I did learn from others that went through something. Listen to your stories. Just like you're taking over an area of operation when one unit, hey, what's going on? What do we need to know going into this area? And let's get a brief, on a situation, and that's how you go on. We're going to run into obstacles every day, but they're just something that we'll eventually get through. So that's enough said for that.
Thank you kindly. That was well stated, council member. Appreciate you. It's lots of obstacles. One that comes to mind is basically just wanting my simple permit for my business. Berkeley Patients Group was one of the original dispensaries. We were grandfathered in by the city. But then talking with our city council, they were like, okay, do this. And we did that. And then we do this. And they'd ask us to do this. And it just seems that we were just jumping through hoops, but they were never arriving at giving us our actual business permit. So we started to look at creative solutions. How could we change the law in Berkeley without the city council members? Without the mayor? Well, our lawyer said, why don't you try an initiative? Oh, an initiative. So we basically gathered signatures for our business permit, as well as some other situations, such as an oversight board. And we took that to the people, gathered signatures, spent the time, the money, and got it on the ballot. Originally, it was Measure R. And we didn't have much money. So it was really hard to do an educational program going against a lot of these politicians who've got every sexy flyer under the sun that is flooding your mailbox en masse. We didn't want to necessarily create more trash out there. So We tried our word of mouth and spread the word and press release and talk to people. And it came to election day in 2004 and we lost. We lost by less than 1% of the vote. So by losing by less than 1% of the vote, you could actually pay for a recount. Well, we had 24 hours to put together $30,000 to actually pay for people to physically look and go back and do the count. Well, back then, this was the first start of using of electronic voting machines. So we asked to look inside the individual voting machines. Alameda County nor Diebold would allow us. They said that we could look into the computer that it had been downloaded into, but we had absolutely no right to the computer that was used for voting. We thought that was kind of weird. Out of left field, we got a call from these lawyers from Florida who said, "Congratulations, you have the perfect storm. Can we take your case and run with it?" And we were like, "Sure, what do you need?" They're like, "Well, we need a couple of complainants." So two of my employees, one Michael Goodbar and Donald Tolbert, rest in peace, were my employees who actually sued Diebold on our behalf and took them to court. And it took 4 years. And in 2008, neither Diebold nor Alameda County could present 420 voting machines. I kid you not. The irony is so thick with this, it's palatable, but they couldn't produce the machines, and out of that, we inadvertently caused a national law. You now won the right through this court case to look inside any and every voting machine. It is now your right as an American. Thank you, Michael Goodbar. Thank you, Donald Tolbert. Rest in peace. They took the chance, rode the wave. It could have just as easily lost, but they won. And by winning, the judge put our ballot back on the ballot, this time as Measure JJ. And I don't think we spent $5,000 to $10,000 on the campaign. And because of the media that had been generated because of Alameda County and Diebold, it was a lot of free advertising. So we just used that, and it was an easy angle for reporters. And after the 2008 vote, we won by over 64% of the vote. So in 2009, 10 years after my company was in business, I finally got an actual business permit. So that's sometimes the obstacles that you don't even realize that have to be overcome, and you have no idea necessarily where they're going to take you, and inadvertently changed American law forever. So that was pretty cool. That was pretty neat. But again, it shows the need for creative solutions and using every aspect of law under the sun to use the system to change for your advantage. So there's opportunities, they're slim, and ours was as a unique and slim a chance as it happened, but we threaded that needle and somehow came out on the other side. So that's an obstacle, just wanting a business permit. It took 4 years in court, but in the end, we won the right. So sometimes that's one aspect you have to use to change things. So, adaptability, being able to, the military definitely taught us that, assess, and, you have no idea if you're going to win. It's a big risk. It's the hugest risk of them all. But the rewards, oh man, when you change history, let me tell you, it's sexy fun time. So that's also my presentation of what is a fix. Michael, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, just I was very appreciative of everybody's comments, but Brian, you said something in particular I wanted to answer to or speak to, this idea of burning bridges. And first of all, it's something my dad was all about. He's a World War II vet, and he would go on about that. Don't burn bridges. But just generally, I think looking at it from my perspective, the old timer activist perspective, thankfully there's not that many true ideological opposition. When you look at the opposition, it's hard to discern from a distance, who's actually got their full heart and soul in it and who's just doing it because that's the kind of the way everything's going. That's the status quo. That's the way they get paid. That's the way not to be embarrassed, whatever, 100 different sort of motivations. But again, thankfully, I could count on my fingers and toes the number of true ideologues we have really opposing us in the entire United States. And yet there's tens of thousands of people that are essentially opposed to us because of their position in the status quo, and legislators based on party, et cetera, et cetera. And the reason why I say that, because if those folks are on the wrong side of something you get mad about and you burn a bridge, then later very well could be somebody that you need to work with that can really help you. What is it, Boehner, the former House majority leader, so adamant in a way against cannabis, and then joins the cannabis industry immediately after leaving Congress. It's amazing who your friends might wind up being. Kamala Harris, before being Senator Kamala Harris or Vice President Kamala Harris was Attorney General Kamala Harris and Prosecutor Kamala Harris. And as a cannabis movement, we totally move on. We appreciate what she's trying to do. We understand what she had to do, and we sort of have a lot of compassion for that, but we watch with a very careful eye, but we don't burn bridges. And I think that's just so important. So thanks for your input, man. And just know that, ideas come and go, and sometimes the old timers can wind up standing in the way of progress if they're too adamant about, oh, we tried that already. Because I'll tell you what, sometimes you try something and then you try it again another time, different set of factors, a different set of variables, and it works. So you gotta look at things with a fresh eye, and that can be some of the most valuable perspectives. So thank you.
All right, Councilmember Robert Kowalski, what's the fix?
Yeah, I think a fix, I don't really have a solid fix other than first and foremost showing up. I found showing up to be absolutely step number one in any type of fix. Without you there in person, without you showing up and putting your voice to a topic or an issue and expecting someone else to take the initiative to do it for you, certainly set you up for failure and in the aspects of not accomplishing anything. Next, I would say, understand the learning curve. In everything, there's a learning curve, whether it's in law or it's in, the advocacy work in general, and understanding the waters that you need to face in order to get to the end goal. I always looked at it as swimming. Most people don't go straight to the ocean and think that they can swim to the first island. They can see most people start in a little kiddie pool and work their way up to eventually they're in the deep end. Once you got everything figured out, then you move on and start trying the bigger goals. So I think the fix is taking it step by step, understanding that the learning curve that you're going to go through as an advocate is the learning curve that every advocate has to go through, and understanding the right way to talk to people that impacts them the most. And the way I might talk to somebody to impact one person might not impact the next person I go to talk to. And so there's a big learning curve in that. And once you start understanding that and start working towards that, you'll find that the advocacy work seems to work a lot easier in your favor. It's never going to be an easy thing, but it definitely becomes easier once you understand the type of war you're fighting, essentially.
And there you go. Councilmember Tony Landry. Go ahead, Tony.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
Oh, good. Well, one thing, the fix would be just to get involved and realizing that it just a small thing like sending an email out or something like that's going to make a difference. And if you do get involved, if you go out to the Capitol, you got to realize we see that a lot of. I saw it in Arizona. I saw it in Louisiana. It's you have advocates that are kind of like a recreational crowd that want cannabis legal, and they go out there dressed in a marijuana leaf and all that. And hey, if it works, it's great. But like you taking like Louisiana, the capital down there, it's pretty conservative. And say if the oyster fishermen are fighting some legislation working through the Capitol that's going to take some oyster rights away, but they can get away with going up there in their fishing boots and their overalls. They can get away with that. That's okay. But if a cannabis advocate goes up there and dress in tie-dye or something, then you're not going to be looked at favorably. So a fix on that is when you go out to the Capitol, think of it as like a doctor's appointment or a business deal. You're going out to negotiate. You're going out, you're going to try and convince these legislators to come around to your side, kind of listen to what you got to say. And if you're dressed, in a marijuana leaf, that's going to be hard to do. It's going to be hard to get past that. So that's one of the obstacles. The fixes can be another obstacle is in advocacy work. It really takes a lot of an individual to go out and seek information on his own to discover how to advocate, because it's not taught in all the universities. I remember back in Louisiana in 2017, I wanted to get started in advocate work, and I called around to all the universities, Louisiana, LSU, all the big universities, asking if they had a little weekend course, or continued education course and how to be an advocate, how to conduct yourself as an advocate. And they didn't have anything. So I started looking around and said, well, we got to do something. So that's when I started my Facebook group, advocate group. And that was my main focus, to tell people information that they could read or watch videos and learn to be able to, advocate. So the fix on that is just to try and get these universities to do some little courses on public forums, so that people, you can do a public forum on Facebook or on Zoom, just to get some feedback and get the public engaged in dialogue on whatever issue you want to fight for. So big thing would be just to get the universities to get involved, or groups to get involved in trying to get people, teach them how to be an advocate. So that's my fix.
Thank you. And we're going to go over to Council Member Brian Buckley, which you are actually threading a unique fix currently with what you're doing, balancing between business and science.
Yes. First I just want to apologize for the previous two comments. I noticed my hair was pretty messy. I was down in the lab doing some work, and with that, I brought great shame and dishonor to the Buckley name. So, Mom, I know you're watching. I apologize, but now I got my Bauer Brothers hat on, so we're ready to rock and roll. Anyway, so this is a great question, and I'm glad I went where I did, because I was like, holy moly, and I think we've heard some great responses. The difficult thing is when you say the word fix, people are kind of looking for like that silver bullet, like this is going to do it for you. And that's not the case. You're going to have to operate in the gray a lot. But I loved what like Robert said, just showing up. It's amazing. There's some things you can't control. You might not be the smartest or the fastest or strongest person, but there are things you can do. And just showing up to something is big. And that seems a lot harder than people realize at times. What Tony said in terms of looking the part, couldn't agree more. I mean, even like people out there in business, you hear the saying, always dress for the next promotion. Like, what's the next job you want to have? I'm telling you, I mean, when you know, when I did stuff in the military, you know, I dressed certain ways for certain things and I dressed differently for other things. You know, if I had to go in front of an ambassador, I'm just going to say there was another unit that went in to talk to an ambassador before us, and they went in with board shorts and like Hawaiian shirts and all this stuff. And it didn't go very well for them. We had a uniform allowance, and I told the guys, go out and get a custom made suit off of that uniform allowance. And we walked in looking very sharp, very well put together. And I think the ambassador was more or less looking at our outfits more than what I was saying. And guess what? We got the mission. So definitely doing that part of like, you know, when I go to DC, I'm going to shave the beard, I'll get a good haircut, and I'll be in the suit, and I'm going to make everyone very comfortable around me. That's just what you need to do. You know, you might not, don't hate the game or hate the player, whatever, you know, it's just the way things go. You know, I also think things for fix, you know, you got to be very surgical in your approach, be very focused. You might be running down a path with an idea, and you might get some other people jumping on saying, well, what about this? And what about that? And what about that other thing? Now you have a lot of asks that might just be too much for someone to really digest and to get everything through. So think about your small victories. If we get this across, and then we can build upon that and build upon that and kind of walk the dog a little bit to get them to your ultimate end state. You know, be careful of bad actors. I mean, we've kind of talked about it before, and especially if you're doing things in the cannabis community, there's some amazing people who are doing things for the right reason, like all my colleagues here on the council. And there's some other people out there that are just looking out for number one, and they want to get some cash real fast. And that can really slow things down and mess it up. And being creative, you know, in terms of what ATN said, I mean, we were trying to figure out, how are we going to do our research and get this across so we can get the data? It's going to be very expensive. And literally, you know, always keep your eyes open. We were staring at a Paul Newman salad dressing bottle and said 100% of profits to charity. And we're like, well, what the heck does that mean? And we talked to our lawyer and our CPA, and they're like, you can do that. And it's been great. So we're doing stuff on a nonprofit side on our research, but then we also have what we like to refer to as a for-purpose company, our cannabis company, Helmand Valley Growers Company. And we use the profits from that to help fuel our advocacy and our research to get this thing across the goal line. And listen, it's better to be lucky than smart. I'm never going to say I'm a smart guy. I just kind of fell backwards into a Paul Newman salad dressing bottle, and here we are today. So anyway, that's what I got. Back to you, ATN.
Thank you very much. All right, we'll go over to Councilmember Jeff Staker.
The fix, most likely, is just to stay focused on your objective. Obviously, you find yourself not traveling the route that you want to get there from time to time. You might have to deviate because you have these obstacles that you have to get around, but still stay focused on it. You know, we're in the military. We've got a sense of, you know, what leadership looks like, what organization looks like, what teamwork looks like, and how to, you know, bring people together, hopefully organize them for the same cause. And obviously, Brian, yes, put on that, I call it the urban ghillie suit, you know. When you're going in front of your politicians or going down to DC, put on that urban ghillie suit and save the shorts and golf shirts for something else. But, you know, some things that, you know, I had to go back to, you know, when I started was, this might be good for Tony, you know, remember, go back to Sun Tzu's Art of War. You know, read it through and through, you know, and yeah, it talks about warfare, but obviously coaches, business professionals, advocacy leaders have taken that information and used it to, you know, accomplish their goals, to get to beat their objectives. And I looked at it too. You know, simple things like know yourself and know your enemy. In 1,000 battles, you'll be victorious, you know. And one thing I said, you know, in this advocacy, especially coming from a patient, you know, that was on oxycodone and seeing a lot of guys overdose and stuff, you know, it's like Sun Tzu says, when you put an army on death grounds, they will fight and be victorious, or they will die trying. And that's a philosophy that I thought about. Yeah, because we're on death ground. We have no other objective but to fight. If not, we'll be dead. So that's the way the fix is. I see it. You just have an objective, stay focused on it, learn education, take leadership courses, take classes, on how to do certain things. For instance, setting up a Zoom meeting or how to speak to your legislators. It's all that stuff is very important for you completing the objective. And I'll end it with that.
More great stuff. Outstanding. I will add, yes, Sun Tzu's book, without a doubt, was one of those that had an influence on me. The other one I would recommend is How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's a very short read, but it's a great way on how to communicate and talk to people. I was gifted it by the gentleman who was a con artist who ripped me off at the age of 18. And he left me in this trailer just that copy of that book just for me. And it needless to say, was an education in life that has taken me very far, because when you start working and talking amongst other people, you're going to find that you don't always have the same ideals, but you can also rally around particular agreements that you believe in universally. So that's a key thing, is to find like-minded ways to enlist people to your cause, so that build organizations. How do you do that? Well, first go join a local organization or a statewide organization or a regional organization or a nationwide organization. Go see what they're doing. There's um, uh, advocacy days, and at the state level there's Americans for Safe Access, National Cannabis Industries Association. They have lobby days, so you can actually go down, learn how to actually lobby Congress people and senators, which, needless to say, was and is quite a intimidating situation. But once you've done it and been through it, you realize it's really not that hard. It's actually pretty easy. It's just, again, getting your ass off the couch, getting your voice out there, staying plugged in, staying active. One of the things we learned to do is, we learned from Jack Herrera and Dennis Perone. They held the light of their torch of their joints in the dark for all of us to see and rally around. And as they got older, they passed those joints on to us. And now we're holding it up in the dark for others to see. So one of the other main things is to hold your light up as long as you can, and then pass the torch on to other people, so that you've got another generation that's educating. Because as we saw, look, 30 years ago when I was out advocating, they said, look, kid, it's never going to happen in your lifetime. Give it up. Shut the fuck up. And I didn't listen to that, nor did a whole bunch of us listen to that. We actually challenged that thought and that mindset and said, no, against your wishes, we're going to change things. And we have. Are they exactly where we wanted them to be? No. Is it a lot better than it was? Absolutely. Could it be a lot better? Damn skippy. So that means we still have to be plugged in. We still have to contribute. We have to educate. We have to work locally. And don't be intimidated by it. Once you affect change, again, it becomes an easy addiction to work and rally around. And when you have the people in your community now look at you as a leader in their community because you've rallied them around, it's another wonderful feeling and sensation that you can be an upstanding pillar in your society and still be in cannabis. Councilmember Michael Krawitz, you had something to say on this.
Yeah, on the fix, man. First, I just want to compliment everyone. Some of the best advice. I mean, really, just to summarize everybody. First of all, on showing up, I remember Lennis Worth in Virginia. Her advice, being an activist, was 3 pieces of advice: show up, show up, show up. It was really funny. I mean, it's that important. And I wrote a little note here: history is written by those who show up. But it really is true. And then focus. It's funny. Early on in cannabis info tables that we did back in the 90s, we would try to cover all these different issues. And I realized that by focusing on just one particular issue, picking one, You know, it's hemp fiber, seed, fuel, whatever. You got health, you got environment, you got, you know, all these different things. You just pick one, pick whatever it is. You know, cannabis is a pain medicine, reducing opiate use. Pick that, whatever, you know, pick that one thing and talk about that and really focus on it and get literature on it and present that. And you'll find it's a heck of a lot more effective than presenting 10 things. And oddly enough, also tone it down. Like cannabis, the truths about cannabis are so profound that you can actually tone it down and make it more believable. You know, it's funny, but you know, you can actually say less about cannabis and actually have it be more effective. It's just so strange. And then the last thing I'll say, just from my experience, what I've found over the years is that if you do what's in your heart, if you just sort of look at what's going on and you do what's in your heart to do, you wind up blending perfectly with everyone around you. It's just phenomenal. But if you look over your shoulders of other people and you try to, you know, see if you could do that better, or you know, think, you know, about other, you know, sort of dimensions like that, comparing in one way or another, or looking, micromanaging, or looking over other shoulders or whatever, thinking about other people's jobs instead of your own, or trying to do someone else's job or instead of your own, then everything gets screwed up. And I've seen it just so many times. And you know, a lot of the work that I've been really successful at is sort of because I was willing to go left to get to the right. You know, I was working on cannabis as a access to cannabis for pain medicine, but I was willing to go off and look at opiate access issues. And it was by looking at opiate access issues that I really got into the whole cannabis reduces opiate use thing, and got into, you know, the VA policy and all this stuff that the regular movement didn't even get into because they stayed away from opiate issues or stayed away from legal drug issues, only worked on illegal drug issues. So I say those two things, you know, don't be afraid to go outside of the silo or whatever and do your own thing, you know, really follow your heart, and you'll find you blend, you know, with everybody. And just emphasizing that one last little piece that I didn't capture in the first little roundup, and that's relationship building. And it's just amazing how much it revolves around relationship building. But if you, as an activist in any particular state, develop a relationship with, let's say, a person in the media and the TV news, or a person in the legislature in any capacity, and you really, you know, establish that relationship and get to know them and get back and forth, you know, on chat, on their text, on their cell phone, to get to know them a little bit, that you'll wind up being an incredibly important person in that state at some point, probably with activism, because that kind of relationship is so valuable to our work.
So plug in, tune in, and get involved. You know, I think we have all shown and given great examples, and I want to again thank everybody tonight for joining. Michael Krawitz, council members Robert Kowalski, Jeff Staker, Brian Buckley, Tony Landry, and myself, Etienne Fontaine. It is imperative. We need your voices. We need you to plug in. You know, sitting on the sidelines is complacency, and there's no time for it. And if the price of liberty is eternal vigilance, then get yourself vigilant. Start looking at what matters to you, what impacts your life, and plug in and learn. And then when you're actually affecting and doing change, there's no feeling like it. There's no pill, there's no drug affecting change and making things better, so that, you know, people have access to something that they would have never had or had before. There's still, you know, there's 15 states, so that means there's another 35 other states that need medical marijuana. So if you're in any of those other states, plug in, get in there, figure it out. Not every state has medical marijuana. Looking at you, Nebraska, you know, there's a lot of people that need to actually contact their legislators, speak up on their issues. Find out right now. It's a brand new year, which means there's brand new legislation in all 50 states. So there's definitely cannabis ones here in California. I know there's ones in other states as well. So educate yourself, plug in. And again, I cannot thank enough all of our council members for what they have done over the decades and continue to do. And as we each push the envelope, I hope we've shown and set examples that are ways that individual normal Americans have found to rise above just sitting aside on the sidelines and just complaining about things. and actually getting in there and making change happen. So we appreciate you all being here for Veterans Action Council Roundtable number 8 on advocacy, and we will see you next week. Thank you very much.